Right, welcome everyone. I presume people that are not wise can see and hear me. So first, I want to acknowledge that we're speaking here at least on the unceded lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and especially during this moment, it's a pleasure to acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging. Today we get to celebrate what I would call one of the generation of heroes, that generation of PhD students that managed to work their way through COVID. Wynn's stories, particularly spectacular example, joined us in early 2017, project going along nicely. By the end of 2019, getting onto the home straight, goes home to Thailand for 6 weeks, comes back 2 years later. The organisation is working for no longer, but it is working within no longer exists. The energy market's been completely restructured, and the piece of research he was going to do to inform kind of maintain these pieces couldn't be done with COVID, so no problem. And it's a testament to the kind of resilience and nimbleness to qualities we're all supposed to be cultivating these days, that he's managed to recover and quickly, getting back kind of at the start of last year. And here we are celebrating the completion of a PhD thesis. Wynn's going to talk to you for about half an hour, and then we'll take some questions from the floor, which I won't moderate. Right, Wynn, all yours.
Thank you, Peter, for your kind introductions, and welcome everyone and thanks for coming along as well. So on my completion seminar, this is indeed a big day for me. I'm delighted to share with you some of my experience in the Australian energy systems, particularly in the spot market modeling realm, with particularly focus on the demand side. These presentations will give you some interesting findings, as well as some controversial discovery that I came across while I was running several hundreds of the model configurations. And the aim of the talk today is to just elaborate on the viability of utilizing demand response to address the grand challenge that the NEM is projected to face, the energy dilemma. Before I tell you how I did it and what I did, I would like to begin with acknowledging the traditional owners of the land in which we made and work, and pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. I would like to thank all my fantastic supervisory panel, Alan Pearce, Roger W, who's probably online today, Kevin Say, for their valuable insights, and special thanks to Peter Renner, my principal supervisor, who's always been for his support, patience, his very patience, and also his encouragement. Without him, I wouldn't be in this position, and I would lost back in my home countries, and I wouldn't come back. Apart from that, thanks to all the friends and colleagues at the Climate Energy College, a place to call home indeed, and also the Melbourne Climate Futures, also the University of Melbourne, and also the taxpayer who also sponsor the stipend that to get me through this PhD life. Lastly, but importantly, my family, extended family, and also my dad, my sister, and also my wife, who is always been supportive to me. The outline of the presentation today is I'll try to keep it short because it is indeed the content is quite rich. So I will begin with setting up the scene and walk you through some modeling approach and present you with some findings, stuff from the study, and moving on to the future study with the high RE world, and also present you with some conclusions. Now, to begin with, in 2017, a former chief scientist of Australia, Dr. Alan Spinkle's introduction of the energy trilemma, essentially aligned me to realize that the transformation I intentionally use a Penrose triangle, as you can see here, or because it's also known as an impossible triangle, because these three policy objectives are in conflict with each other, and it is nearly impossible to enhance all trees without making the trade-off with one another. In this trilemma, the most crucial aspect of the energy systems concerning the fundamental of the energy security is that the system must always maintain a supply-demand equilibrium at all times. The impact from climate change are increasingly apparent. Without the adequate actions on climate and energy, it is expected that Australia will fail to meet its international pledges or obligations and potentially fall into the 3-degree scenario's pathway. Consequences of that inactions are also apparent. We have witnessed 1 in 10 years bushfires in the last few years, and also last year that we witnessed 1 in a century flood in parts of Victoria. The potential damages caused by a lack of proper actions on climate are estimated to reach 762 billion by 2050. So, how do we address these problems? To achieve a sustainable, affordable, and low-carbon society, the electricity must require a substantial expansion of its generation fleets to the one dominant by renewable technologies. Why is that? Because the energy sector was the largest emitter, accounting around 1/3 of the total carbon budget. Fortunately, in Australia, the drive for changes come from both the federal government and the consumers. We have seen renewable investments which place us in the top 5 globally in terms of renewable investment in the last few years. And we have reached the tipping point for renewable deployment as well. As a result, in 2022, carbon emissions from the electricity sector were curbed under the first time since 1990. So it is now clear that the national electricity market, or the NEM, I will use this term more often right now, the NEM, has chosen to pave its spiritual path towards a cleaner grid with higher level of renewable penetration. However, questions surrounding reliability, operational, and timing arise due to the intermittent natures of variable renewable energy sector resources. As you can see here, the big list of the literature. Over the past decade, numerous studies envision scenarios for 100% renewable energy system in the NEM. However, there is a clear research gap, which is the insufficient focus on the demand side, including demand response. So what is demand response? As defined by Australian Renewable Energy Agency, demand response involves involuntary actions to reduce or shift electricity used by consumers for an incentive. The concept is simple. Small energy load reductions across numerous participants can lead to large reliable impact, reducing stress, stabilizing costs. These measures can be done through 2 widely recognized approaches, which is load shedding, load shifting. So the question is, how much demand response do we have in the system right now? In 2020, Energy Synapse quantified the theoretical potential of demand response to be around 4.3 gigawatt. To give you some perspective, 4.3 gigawatt is around 15% of the peak demand, 10 to 15% of the peak demand. Yet while the extent of its potential is known, past research has mainly focused on small-scale samples or experiments, leaving the integration of demand response into the larger scale spot market largely unexplored. Therefore, today, the unique contributions of these extends beyond the merit of demand response potential and incorporate demand response measures into the NEM-wide spot market. The expected outcomes aim to quantify the financial benefits of the energy, the financial benefits of demand response in the real world spot market. Now, approach that we use. Let me walk you through the approach that I have throughout my research. There are indeed 4 steps, but let's go one by one then. Step 1, I specify the boundaries and establish the scope. So as we know from the preliminary study that the theoretical potential size of the demand response is around 4.3 gigawatt. So we decided to go back in time to look where the problem actually was, and we selected 2014's heat wave events, which is one of the which was 1 in 10 years events, and we expand lens to a greater, wider time span from 2017 to 2021. As this is modeling work, it requires some tools. The tool that I use throughout this modeling works is called NEM, which I will explain in detail later on. After we got the model that we need, we look for the data set and we feed everything onto the high performance computing unit or the supercomputer, if you like, for to expedite the computational time. Now, all the modeling works require refinements and enhancements. So we have reached some of the limitations that NumPy can. So we have to refine the model to suit with any scenario that we wish to study, so that we can conduct some scenario analysis. Allow me to guide you through in more details about NumPy. NumPy is essentially a Python package for modeling the Australian national electricity market dispatch procedures. It was developed by a team at UNSW. Thanks Nick Gorman, a man who is essentially behind this modeling tool. Because the spot market is inherently complex, for the sake of simplicities, today I will give you a simplified explanation. Now, the dispatch engine employs mixed integer linear programming to optimize the cheapest combinations of generator according to their merit order. Now that I have introduced a new term, merit order, how the spot market and merit order works, it essentially works in the loop every 5 minutes. So every 5 minutes, the algorithm generates bits by price until the demand is met. Typically, generators with lower short-run marginal costs, such as solar and wind, as you can see here in the bottom left of the screen, they dispatch first. And prices that everyone get paid is the highest bid correlated to meet the demand. In this case, gas-fired power plants, typically considered as the high marginal cost. I usually use this analogy to compare gas-fired power plant to compare them with cheetah. The cheetahs, they're fast, but they spend most of the day waiting or idling or conserve their energy. And once that golden chance comes, they never hesitate to fire up their powerful energy and very responsive. So it's similar to gas-fired power plant. So once we incorporate everything into the model with the data set we need, we see some set of results. The impact of the demand response during this weather event is significant. It can be seen that demand response potentially mitigates the occurrences of price spikes and half the wholesale prices during this weather event in 2015 in South Australia and in Victoria. As you can see on the screen on the top right chart, the red dots represent the historical prices and the green dots represent the model price. So you can see that the price reduced significantly if we apply the AEMO to the heat wave events. So you may have wondered how demand response mitigate price spikes or spot prices, reduce spot prices. It does by substituting high cost generators such as gas or diesel generators because those generation technologies have a very low utilization rates and also their market power when other options are not available at that peak times. They have very high market power. So during this short experiment of 5 days, the potential financial benefits could be billions from cumulative market expenditure savings. Let's expand the lens towards the wider time span from 2017 to 2021. We indeed see a peculiar market behavior before and after a shutdown of a large-scale baseload coal-fired plant, Hazelwood here in Victoria. We see some increased price fluctuations trend, as you can see on the top right chart. In contrast, the bottom right exhibits, winter, and winters tend to be more stable in terms of price spikes, and they also hardly require demand response. Some other conclusions from this study is price spike aren't solely corresponded to demand variations. Supply shortage can also play a significant role, and demand response could mitigate unforeseen factors like weather changes leading to unexpected supply shortfall due to its quick wrap-up time. Now, as we have witnessed the significant benefits of demand response, let's move towards the implications of the future electricity market with high renewable penetrations that is yet to be unfolded. As the NEM ventures into an uncertain territory of high renewable penetrations, decreased reliance on fossil fuels, and increased reliance on energy storage, the integrations of demand response in such environment could serve as a valuable asset. This territory is indeed unexplored. So the 3 remaining research questions emerge. By analyzing the spot market with various demand response options, it aims to offer valuable insights on how Australia can optimally balance the energy trilemma in the future. Moreover, it delves into the unexplored territory in which the energy storage and demand response could play in the future electricity market with high penetration of renewable. Here is the future state of the market and demand response. In the future grid is envisaged to be increasingly integrated, coordinated, and intertwined, leading to improved efficiency, flexibility, and reliability, coupled with the transformation of energy used from other sectors such as transport, as we can see here from electric vehicles that they use higher electricity, and this process is known as sector coupling. Therefore, it is projected that future electricity demand will substantially higher. As the grid becomes more interlinked, the system will transform towards a more circular structure, as you can see in the diagram on the right-hand side. Two-ways or even multi-ways communications and benefit sharings can be expected in the future grid. Likewise, it is projected that new business models within the demand side realm will form, and these entities such as demand response aggregators and load serving entities may potentially work in partnership with energy retailers. Therefore, it is anticipated that the theoretical potentials of demand response will be substantially higher in comparison to the quantified size in 2020. And this idea essentially backed up by a study done by the Australian Renewable Energy Agency in 2022, which they postulated the cost of the future DR to be around 15 gigawatt. Now, let me stress the nuanced differences between the widely adopted capacity expansion modeling approach and the approach that we use in this study, dispatch modeling approach. The capacity expansion focuses on micro level, longer term transformations, while the dispatch modeling techniques provide detailed operational insights. It can capture operational complexity, uncertainty associated with the intermittent and distributed energy resources. So as we have seen the big list, of the literature, and they are the studies in the past. Among those studies, what market combination did we actually choose to integrate into our spot market modeling? AEMO ISP 2022 was chosen due to its comprehensiveness, and is also in line with the IPCC 6th report, which stipulated that to remain inside the 1.5 degree scenario, we must embrace high renewables in the electricity sector for around 7% by 2050. And this blueprint also suggested to use proven technologies such as wind and solar, unlike some other modeling study, capacity expansion modeling study, where they suggested to use immature technologies or unproven technologies such as like concentrated solar, thermal, or wave energies, such and such. So the strength of this modeling study is utilize the empirically grounded data inputs on both supply and demand side. The only floating variables are the level of demand response scenarios. I will talk about the three key scenarios, which is, and I will start one by one from the base scenario with the conservative level of demand response. So in this base scenario, modeling of conservative level of demand response versus the projected business as usual demand profile. It revealed that the NEM would largely enjoy its reliable and reasonably priced electricity, with the projected wholesale price ranging between -$90 to $300 per megawatt hour. To give you some perspective, nowadays wholesale price should be less than $100 per megawatt hour, but in winter it could be as high as $300 per megawatt hours. We can see marginal impact from demand response deployment, where it is generally reliable under the circumstances. We see a caveat that the NEM may experience higher electricity prices due to short-term shortfalls of supply during winter months. Moving on to the higher demand scenario, should the NEM evolve towards a landscape with higher adoption of electric vehicles, accelerated electrification under the sector coupling scenarios, the natures of demand profile would undergo significant changes, as you can see here in the chart, that the ratio of the peak and troughs are much higher in comparison to what you see nowadays in the demand profiles. So the evening peak tends to be spiky and deviates from the intermediate load by a substantial margin, and as you can see here is around roughly 10 gigawatt, which is very significant value. On the supply side, extended period of low intermediate load supply could influence higher electricity prices and could cause short-term and medium-term storage to be exhausted. During this time, energy storage aims to remain in the game by arbitraging, even though the spot price are higher than the regular time. With these anticipated grid configurations, the NEM could potentially face a period of blackout when the variable renewable energy output plunges below 14 gigawatt. for multiple days, as you can see. This level of variable renewable energy output is less than 32% in comparison to the peak demand, and is significantly below the recommended baseload supply of at least 20 gigawatt. Where this 20 gigawatt coming from? It's coming from base load of the electricity that it should be. So these periods could have profound implications for the stability and reliability of the future NEM. But where is this potential issue comes from? Let's deep dive into the regional basis. So it potentially comes from New South Wales, as you see here, that we can see the big shortfalls of demand of supply and demand mismatch. So under these circumstances, New South Wales would be required substantially power or energy to be drawn from other interconnected states. So this also highlights the importance of transmissions interconnections in the future. Now, could we truly be on the blink of a blackout under these, if we go on with the current AEMO ASP plan? The answer is possibly yes. Why I say that? Because according to recent research findings from Gilmore et al., they essentially examined the real-world variable renewable outputs from the 42 years time span, and concluded that the worst 2-week output could only yield 54% compared to the average. As you can see in the top right corner chart there, the expected output of the 42 year time span versus the blue line, which is the average potential output. They also further concluded that the VIE drought is potentially more pronounced during winter months across various locations. And as you can see in this chart, that is exhibit a U shape and it's dropping during winter months. And also, this also substantiates by the that they just published paper this year, and Richardson et al. Research is also in good agreement with Gilmore, and they substantiate that compound solar and wind droughts occur predominantly in winter, around 10% of winter days, which could be translated to 9 days of shortfalls, which is huge. So, speaker here, that I don't know if I can move the mouse, but no, it's not very true. That's anyway. More than 30% possibility of wind droughts in all right. Next is could demand response if we integrate a higher level of demand response into the mix. So answer yes, but for how long? Compared to the central scenario with conservative level of demand response, now by pulling everything onto the table with the combinations of demand response measures such as load shifting, shedding, and demand, load reduction as well. This high demand response scenario could potentially avoid blackout. However, the NEM is projected to remain under, because under this circumstance, I will dismantle it slowly. Shallow and medium storage systems will be exhausted well before 7 o'clock. As you can see, they are the price spikes, they are the spot price, dollars per megawatt hour. They spike right after 7 p.m., which means that right after the storage is depleted. battery charging becomes critical due to diminished solar irradiance because we're talking about winter here. There is no sun, as you can see. And as that's compounded with the frequent evening tranquility as well, low wind supply. And coordinated, distributed, driven demand response potentially shift this morning peak for a few hours. When but however, despite all these demand response measures, the combined measures of DR, the wholesale prices remain unaffected. As you can see, the price still reach the peak due to supply deficits, with the NEM still facing potential blackout. Should the VRE drought even more severe than market? Now, the benefits of demand response are clear. It can potentially enhance the NEM reliability, avert high electricity prices during congested periods. Although the potential supply deficiency issues may overshadow its benefits. Its financial advantages can be quantified as follows. As you can see here, that the magnitude and occurrences of price terms are reduced, hence the volume weighted average prices. The combined value of demand response mechanisms lower monthly electricity price by 13%, with a potential reductions in market expenditures of 0.68%, which can be translated to around 35 billion of the monthly saving of the market expenditure savings. However, it should be noted that this potential saving must be considered under the context of broader grand challenges like the supply deficit that we're facing, which could push this figure a little higher than if the NEM is under normal operation. We have come to the conclusions. So the profound transformations of the electricity sector is underway, and along with the progress in demand side dynamics. Therefore, I urge to escalate the importance of electricity demand and also the demand side to be equally as important as the supply side. As we have witnessed that demand response could potentially enhance the NEM, could be used as one of the key in the triumph for energy trilemma. It works well in certain instances when load are sufficient, as you have seen in the resource specialist study, and during sufficient supply periods in the future scenarios. Next is demand response and potentially complement energy storage in the higher RE world. It effectively smooths the transitions during periods of high demand and limited solar generations. For example, demand response could accommodate pumped hydro storage, which is known to be slow lamp of time technologies. And by deferring early morning peak demand for a few hours until the solar becomes available, because demand response is quicker compared to pumped hydro storage. Now, should the transformations towards highly electrified world is quick, it's sad to say that demand response may not be an all-encompassing solutions. I mean, there is no silver bullet here, because the magnitude of problems is substantially large. So the capacity and resource planning is of paramount importance. While we hope for the recently priced electricity from the least cost configurations, we would end up with an increased reliance on backup gas or diesel generators, leading to higher costs and hindering the high climate goals. This is why I introduced the Trilemma in the first place. Now, the policy implications, I split them into two themes. social science themes and also physical science theme. Start off with the social science one. As we envisage that the future grid will be more interlinked and intertwined, the development of forward-looking institutional arrangement would be imperative, as well as the innovative business models of demand response that is potentially catalyzed by the emergence of Internet of Things. For the physical science theme, although the demand response could flatten or shift away peaks, the classic demand-side management measures such as energy efficiency is often overlooked from the students. Even though this energy efficiency measure could potentially reduce demand from the source and could potentially help, during the time of the VRE drought during winter months in the future. So I urge to harness stringent energy efficiency measures such as efficient space heating and stringent building codes. Yep. Next is to consider overbuilding generation. The NEM would require a necessary base load and intermediate load capacity of at least 60% compared to the peak demand, to the forecast peak demand, or around 25 gigawatts. And potentially harness the potent from offshore wind power as well. As we can see from the current AEMO ISP plan, this potential to be ignored. It could enhance the capacity of the supply during winter nights. It could address that problem. And I also recommend to re-evaluate and optimize geographic distribution strategies. Under this current AEMO ISP plan, I saw that 4 out of 9 renewable energy zones are not exploited. And equally, it is imperative to reassess energy storage strategies, as higher proportion of new storage will be needed in comparison to battery storage, which can store energy for up to like 4 hours. Even though I have seen some good news that South Australia is planning to have 12 hours of battery energy storage. But should that be enough for the multiple days of VRE drought? That raised the questions for you. So, last but not least, I urge to enhance interconnection to New South Wales to Queensland. As you can see from the figure, that the main problem could potentially come from part of New South Wales and Queensland, as backed up by Richardson research. I'm talking about the VRE drought problem. So most of these policies open up for the further scrutiny by researchers. And that's all for today. And now the floor is open. Sure. Sure thing.
The ISP has a significant reduction overall in the amount of fuel. You don't know how much
Yes, they do. So because the study is done under a fixed constraint in the year of 2035, we aiming towards a 97% reductions by 2050. But in 2035, we still there are still around 13% of that remaining. It's hard to say because we're talking about the primary energy productions and the total installed capacity. But my answer is the total installed capacity. The operation that is concerning the operational of the grid, right? If we have, it doesn't matter if you have 13%, but the grid is poorly managed. It could increase the level of utilization to 20%. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Reducing no one like one more than renewable is actually no, the non-renewable one percent also my we think like on the carbon credit economic thing is like the rather than we the renewable you going down so the battery only can sustain the I'm not sure if my question is how is related to your question.
First thing, so if this upset you, but I think it's not true that the fossil fuels will be cheaper, considering that utilization rate will be lower and lower. That increase their cost. To embrace the climate goals, the international climate pledges, we also have to increase use of the zero emissions technologies. And I heard that even though you fit that with the CCS, carbon capture storage, it is increased significantly. From the studies, the level of cost of electricity coming from those technologies equipped with CCS could be over $200 per megawatt hour. That's their kind of like their cost. But when they bid into the spot market, they probably bid $500 per megawatt hour, is significantly higher. To answer to that question about the carbon credit, essentially it's of my research topic that I can comment a little on that. Maybe I could be wrong. That it would be viable if we really need, to the general public to realize the need of the transformations. It seems like the Commonwealth government is rich enough to invest in that on our own. So we may or may not need them. We may potentially need them only if we want to promote some expensive technology in the future, if you know what I mean. Yep. So the criteria. So what we have modeled is we model the concept, the business as usual projected demand profiles, as well as the sector, the one with the sector couplings. So this even the business as usual demand profiles, and we can see this is the plot is walking theoretical supply output that, this is not from the spot market. This is from the potential variable electricity combined with gas and for the rest of the fossil fuels. For the gas, which is not realistic. This is the potentially the maximum output that we can get, and we still see 15 consecutive hours. That is quite substantial, but we managed. I modeled that, and we in the real spot market, and we can swiftly get away with that because we have pump hydros, because we plan to have Snowy 2.0, which large enough to tackle with that requirements.
Thank you. My question is related to quantifying. But it's also in high penetration. I mean, what kind of demand response can be supplied kind of demand response, and what kind of
energy storage.
Yeah.
Right. It's essentially it can complement energy storage, because right now that the projected plan that I'm working on, we have around 4 gigawatt of battery energy storage, 4 gigawatt of pump hydro storage, but we have very significant amount of energy, hidden in the form of reservoir and for pump hydro, but for batteries we probably have only 4 to 6 hours. As you can see here, that the shortfall generally coming from when the energy storage depleted. And why do I say that we potentially experience the shortfall in the future? Because of the magnitude of the variable renewable energy drought. The drought is multiple days, which means we're talking multiple gigawatt hours, even significantly larger than the Snowy 2.0 capacity. And Snowy 2.0 is capable of providing only 2 gigawatts. Battery depleted just a few hours after the drought, and we rely solely on the pump hydro storage. So demand in this case coming along to reduce the load. We potentially need some form of load reductions and shifting. Shifting could come from batteries, EV parts. Yes. Does that make sense to you? Does that answer your question? So that's my conclusion is, even though we almost all the demand, we may see blackout because the magnitude of the supply demand response. So we probably need like 10 Snowy projects to overcome that. That will come back to the carbon tax questions that we might. No, because all the data inputs that I used incorporate into the model, I use AEMO ISP 2023 version, and they haven't really utilized offshore wind farm. So I stress the importance of that. that it would be great if we could explore that. Off the top of my head, the capacity factor of the wind offshore wind farm is much higher, about 10%. But the fact that I don't have the data just yet for the actual measured capacity factor, historical data of the capacity factor, but we do have a very beautiful data sets of the measured capacity factor of the concerning onshore wind farm throughout the 41 renewable zones. All right. So on the high RE scenario, I remember that I modeled 4.5 gigawatt of load reduction potentials and perhaps 3.5 gigawatt of load shifting potentials, and that's potentially comes from the use of electric vehicles in the future. So as the form of distributed, coordinated distributed resources. Yeah, as you can probably go into more detail. That's that I already answered your question.
Yeah.
That's that. Sure. So in this case, under these circumstances, it's responded by prices, as you can see here that yeah. Right. Sure, go on. Everything separated. So NEM is essentially based on AEMO database. So you can pick a very wide range of data sets. You can incorporate the demand profile from regional demand profile, and also to directly answer the questions. The output of NEM essentially prices, electricity prices, that the combinations of the generations that you put, and it's optimizing that the least cost combination based on the merit order. It's 5-minute prices. Yes, that's right. 1 year. 1 year. So 2035 throughout. Yeah, from January to December. For 5 days of data, we're talking 40 gigawatt. Sorry, 40 gigabytes. No, it mixed up, and it took me roughly 2.5 hours for the 5 days of data. But we have multiple scenarios, so that took me a couple of months to run all the scenarios. Yeah. That's right. I haven't, because that took me a couple of months already. Any more questions? Yes. Or Chang at the back.
So for the 2035 scenario,
along from ranking, over another point based on the others, the top of the. So I'm not sure for the 2025 scenario whether you know the top of the side and the bracket 5 or you're still long term.
That's really good questions. Because the high reliance on the historical bidding data, but how would I come up with the future bidding behaviors? So I took the data from 2022 month by month and extrapolate that from the compound and the growth of the approach that essentially used by AEMO to extrapolate the data onto the next 12, 13 years ahead. And we come up with the, just to give you an idea, the current market price cap is around $15,500 per megawatt hour, but in 2035, the projected market price cap is $20,700 per megawatt hour during this first half of the year, and $22,000 per megawatt hour. And I extrapolate all the bid behavior from that 500 of generators, multiple hundreds of generators, and as well as the storage from there. That's how I did it. That could be one of the main limitations, because no one would have a good guess on the right. So I leave that as the potential future works that for the true cost of not only demand response, but also maybe the potentially energy storage and the agent-based modeling that we can do in the future.
Congratulations on what I think is and kind of holding true to the promises, the results that I've already the series results for these. What the hell? And working through that being issues is great. And I think it's a credit to hold true to that and kind of explore what that might mean.
I do appreciate it. Peter, thank you very much.